Hello, hello, everybody, and good evening to you. I hope you are having a great day today. So, we are going to talk about a very interesting news story that broke actually just yesterday, today. And I'm curious to hear what you think about it and how much you've read about it if you have any thoughts about it. But we're going to get into it in a minute, which is basically the state of Louisiana is now requiring all of their public schools to display the Ten Commandments. And this includes both elementary, middle, high school, but also in institutions of higher learning that are funded by the state of Louisiana. So we're going to get into that in a second. I just want to say hello and welcome to this platform. My name is Monica Maybank, also known as a holy politician. Thank you so much for joining tonight. My goal is for all of us to vote holy in the general election, which is coming up very soon on November the 5th of this year. And so the goal is for us to be armed with information, with knowledge, with understanding, so that when we go to the polls and just when we're making daily decisions about how public policy affects our lives, we're voting with holiness in mind, we're voting for truth, and we're also voting because we've done our research and we've done our due diligence to study the policies. We can no longer be active and passive voters. Yes? We got to do the research and know what's happening at the local, the state, and the federal level. So that's why I'm here to encourage you to educate yourself, to arm yourself with knowledge, information, but also to really spend time studying God's word, because that's where you get a lot of revelation on how to vote, not only how to live your life, but on how to vote holy. So let's get into it. So the state of Louisiana, which I'm sure many of us have gone there for vacation. Some of us maybe have family from Louisiana. I was talking to my dad this week, who was telling me that my grandmother, his mom, is actually from the state of Louisiana. So, anyway, Louisiana has become the first state to require the Ten Commandments be displayed in every public school classroom. And so, you know what hit the fan when this law was signed by the governor there, Jeff Landry, who was a new governor in the state of Louisiana. Anyway, it was signed into law yesterday. So it went through the House, it went through the Senate and the state legislature, and then it was finally signed into law. And so, what is the law? We're going to talk about that a little bit. But you can actually look up the law yourself, and I would encourage you to do that if you're interested. It's a very short bill. I think it's about 6 pages in length. So you can read it for yourself. But the law requires basically that a poster sized display of the Ten Commandments in large, easily readable font be displayed in all public classrooms from kindergarten to state funded universities. And so the legislation is originally House Bill 71. So, again, if you're curious and you want to read more, look it up. But it's House Bill 71 in the state of Louisiana. And some of the things that it states is including the Ten Commandments in the education of our children is part of our state and national history, culture, and tradition. And obviously, when they say "our," they're referring to children in their state, Louisiana. The legislation also states that basically the Ten Commandments was cited by the fourth president of the United States, James Madison, when he was making an argument for why the country is what it is, and basically making an argument for the way that we should govern ourselves under moral law. James Madison cited the Ten Commandments. And so the poster, another thing that it says in the legislation is that it specifies the details of the poster, right? It has to be an 11 by 14 paper size. And the majority, basically where the Ten Commandments is focused, it has to be the predominant piece of that poster, if you will. And so the interesting thing about this legislation is um, it's not the only focus of this legislation. It also talks about the Declaration of Independence needs to be posted in classrooms. It talks about the Mayflower needs to be posted in classrooms, the Mayflower Compact. But a lot of it does center around the Ten Commandments if you read the bill. Um, what are the Ten Commandments? I don't know if you all have read them lately. Have you read the Ten Commandments recently? Can you say them all by heart? I'll give you 10 seconds to see if you can start reciting them. What's the first commandment? So the 10 commandments, you can find them in Exodus 20. That's where you can find them in the Bible. You can also find them in Deuteronomy, I believe. But the 10 commandments are all spelled out in this legislature. They paraphrase them, but they're there. And they're there in the King James Version. So the 10 commandments: I am the Lord thy God. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make to thyself any graven images. Thou shalt not take the name of thy Lord in vain. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. These are going to be posted in classrooms. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Apparently, the governor said, in quotes, if you want to respect the rule of law, you've got to start from the original lawgiver, which was Moses, who got the commandments from God. And so this is something that other states have tried before to get the 10 commandments published in classrooms, but there have been Supreme Court cases that have fought it, but there also have been Supreme Court cases that have validated it. And so obviously this will be litigated at some point. Somebody will file a lawsuit against this. But the reality is we live in a day and age where morality needs to come back in classrooms. There are many states that no longer even say the Pledge of Allegiance. And that's shocking because I grew up in the state of California where we actually said the Pledge of Allegiance. But one of my daughters, who grew up in the District of Columbia, I don't think she said it one time there. And so lots of kids don't even know the Pledge of Allegiance because it says one nation under God. But that's the pledge, that we've been saying for years and years and years, that we've used as our commitment, right, to this country. And so if you look around us, we need morality back in schools. We need morality back in classrooms. And so I just wanted to share some more highlights about what this is going to require. Um, I think I mentioned this already, well, I didn't mention this part. The posters that are required to be published are going to be paired with a 4-paragraph context statement describing how the 10 Commandments were a prominent part of American public education for almost 3 centuries. And then finally, this is going to have to start being published by the beginning of 2025. And so this is coming to Louisiana classrooms until and unless there is a lawsuit that's filed against the state, which again, I'm sure will happen any second now. But the reality is this is not far-fetched, right? We are suffering from moral decay in the United States of America. And we see it every day, even in the current month that we're living in, right? We can celebrate this innocuous and preposterous thing called Pride Month, but then we want to fight against people asking for morality to show up in classrooms every day. And so this is why it's more and more important that as we get closer to election season, as the years go on, that we start using our voices a little bit more, not only at the polls and in the voting booth, but every day, right? Some of you may have to stand up in your workplaces, but the more that you spend time with the Lord and the more that you spend time understanding what he's requiring of us in this season, the less fearful you will be. All right. And so one of the things that I wanted to share, the reason why Louisiana is able to pass a law like this is because they have something within their policymaking apparatus that's called a trifecta. And there are a number of states, actually, the majority of states in the United States have a trifecta. But what do I mean by a trifecta? Well, basically, a trifecta is one political party is controlling the political apparatus in a state. And so you have one political party that's dominating both chambers of the legislature, and then you have the same political party that is in the governor's mansion, right? So the governor is of the same party. The majority of people in the House and the majority of the people in the Senate and the state legislature are of the same party, and that's considered a trifecta. When you have a trifecta, that means that policymakers pretty much in the same party are going to be working to advance their policy agenda. And for Louisiana, for whatever reason, this became part of their policy agenda. And so it's less likely for it to be hard for them to pass policies that they all agree with through their policy platform. If you have all Republicans running a state, then the Republicans are going to push their issue. If you have all Democrats running a state, then Democrats are going to push their issue, right? So in 2024, this might surprise you, but there are 40 state trifectas. That's almost every state in the United States of America has a trifecta. There are only 10 states with what some people call a divided government, where either the governor is a Democrat and the state legislature is all Republicans, or maybe the governor is a Republican and the state legislature. You might have the House that are predominantly run by Democrats, the Senate that's predominantly run by Republicans, but we only find divided government in 10 states. So that might shock you, right? So there are 40 states that have trifectas where you have the one party or the other pretty much running policy in that state. And so the only states with a divided government are, do you know if your state has a divided government? Do you know this? The only states with a divided government are Alaska, Nevada, Arizona, Kansas, Wisconsin, Kentucky, North Carolina, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Vermont. So if you're in one of those states, your state does not have a trifecta. Your state has divided government, which means what? That there's probably more compromising happening in those states, right? But in like a state like where I live, which is Florida, we have a Republican stronghold on in our policy institutions. The governor is Republican. The House the House Assembly is basically predominantly Republican, as well as the Senate and the state is predominantly Republican. So there are more Republican trifectas than Democratic trifectas. So look it up. You can actually learn more about the trifectas and different things that are happening as it concerns state policy at multistate.us if you're curious to know whether or not your state has a Republican trifecta or a Democratic trifecta. You can look it up there. But again, I just want us to be empowered and to understand how policies are made at the federal, state, and local level. Why is a state like Louisiana able to push forward a policy like this? Well, it's because they have a trifecta. And so think about how important policymaking is at the state level, right? Again, it's not only important to go to the polls every 4 years, it's important to go during the in between years because oftentimes you're voting for state and local representatives who are going to represent your issue or not. So stay educated, stay encouraged, do your research and do your due diligence because we are truly living in a time where we have to speak up and we have to speak up loudly, not just voting on November 5th and during the general election, but voting and taking a stand all the time. Next week will be interesting because that is the first presidential debate between the top two contenders. We all know who those are, but it's going to be an interesting debate nonetheless. So I would encourage you to just continue praying for our country, pray for our nation, pray for both candidates, pray, just pray, 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 pray. And I'm going to be doing the same. Take care, and I look forward to seeing you again on the next live stream. God bless.